to the Fuel Pulse Show podcast, where we talk about all things fuel for all kinds of people. I'm your host, Erik Bjornstad, and I'll be your guide through the ever-changing world of fuel. Now, in today's episode of the Fuel Pulse Show Back to School, we want to talk about the basics behind long-term diesel fuel storage, what to expect to happen to the fuel when it's stored, and how best to help it last the longest. So what happens when you store fuel? Well, let's start at the beginning. Diesel fuel is refined and blended and produced at the refinery. And when it leaves the refinery, it meets all the necessary specs, and you would expect it to perform at its best at that time. And one thing it also has when it's first starting out there is it has these reactive, unstable molecules as part of its composition. And unstable reactive molecules are always looking for things to react with, to make themselves whole, basically. Same concept when they talk about free radical molecules in the human body. These are molecules that go around in your body looking to react, looking for trouble, essentially. Over the course of the fuel's life, there are chemical degradation reactions that are happening from virtually the start of the fuel's life. And if you leave the fuel for long enough on its own, like in storage, then gums and varnishes and deposits will eventually form simply because of this. Now, how long will it take to happen? How quickly can it happen in your fuel? Well, that can actually be influenced in both directions. These reactions or this process can be sped up, or it can be slowed down depending on what you do. Now, these reactions can happen faster if the fuel is exposed to things from the environment that speed that process up. And we'll talk about what some of those things are shortly. And then on the opposite end, the process can be slowed down by doing some other things that slow it down. And we'll talk about those shortly as well. So what speeds up fuel degradation in storage? Mainly, it's when the fuel in the course of its storage life gets exposed to things around it or things from the environment, which play a part in accelerating the degrading of the fuel. Okay, like what? Well, heat. Heat speeds up all of those chemical reactions linked to degrading the fuel. This kind of process always happens faster in hot weather than cold weather. There's exposure to oxygen that will speed up oxidative breakdown of the fuel. Oxidative breakdown is a series of chemical reactions where oxygen reacts with the fuel molecules and contributes to its degrading. Water presence also contributes because it's associated with other kinds of chemical reactions, hydrolysis reactions. But also beyond that, water is a key link to the fourth thing, which is microbial effects. Microbes degrade fuel in a number of ways because they can consume parts of the fuel. They will produce acids that will react with and attack the fuel's quality. Microbes are also bad because they corrode fuel storage tanks. And they also produce this biological material called biofilm or biomass, and that will plug filters, and it will actually also contribute to corrosion itself. Now, we said that water is linked to this because the more water you have in your system, the higher the chances of microbial contamination situation developing. So, heat, exposure to oxygen, water buildup, and microbial contamination. All of these make stored fuel go bad faster. Now, before we talk about the converse, what slows it down, let's touch on the question of, are there any ways to tell how healthy or how far along in the degradation process your fuel is? How can you tell the fuel is unstable or if the fuel is on its way to being unstable? Well, you can make valid inferences from different kinds of testing. There are numerous different tests that will tell you something meaningful about the fuel's properties and its condition. But it's important to also understand that there may be differences in what some of these test results really mean, what they're really telling us, and it's helpful to know what those differences are. Now, you can divide the universe of fuel tests into two broad categories. There's, on the one hand, there are fuel tests that tell you this is how the fuel is right now. It tells you what the fuel's condition is in a specific way right now. But then the other tests results say This is a snapshot prediction of the direction that the fuel's condition is heading. So with that in mind, let's talk about the tests that can speak to this question of your stored fuels condition. You might also be able to frame it as, what kind of testing will best tell me if my fuel is either already bad or is heading in that direction? So for that, we consider three big test options. First option is the water and sediment test. It's in the ASTM 975 slate. This is the only one out of the three that's not predictive. It's actually descriptive. The water and sediment test tells you how much water and sediment are in the fuel at the time of testing. Now, if the fuel is unstable, if the fuel has degraded or is degrading, then it will produce these sediments. Then these sediments will have been produced and they will show up on that test. That test result will be high. The test can also be high if there is excess free water or suspended water. Either way, a failing result here on a water and sediment test is a sign that you need to take some kind of action for the health of your fuel. Test number 2 is the oxidative stability test. Oxidative stability is a predictive test that will tell you if nothing changes about how the fuel is stored. It will tell you the likelihood that that fuel is going to degrade and produce those degradation products, those deposits, gums, varnishes. If your oxidative stability test result is higher than recommended, then again, you need to do something. Then the third thing is microbial testing. Microbial testing tells you if the microbe levels in the fuel are high enough to expect problems. And if they are, then you can be pretty certain that your fuel is going to be headed towards instability and degradation if it's not already there. And that's because of what the microbes do to it. So if a microbial test is too high, again, you need to do something. All right, so we know what speeds up stored fuel breakdown. And we know some of the ways that you can tell how bad it is or what condition your fuel's in. Now, let's consider the converse. What slows down the degradation process? Well, you're not likely going to be able to do something about heat affecting the fuel. And you can't really keep the fuel in the real world from being exposed to oxygen. So that's not something you can practically mitigate. But there are some other things that you can do. Thing number 1, removing things you find like water and biomass. When these are detected, it's always a good idea to remove them. I mean, think about it. If water presence is considered to be part of this degradation equation, then removing the water helps break that equation, right? Plus, removing water and removing biomass also reduces the chances of microbial problems developing in the future. And if you have a microbial problem existing already alongside this, removing the water and the biomass is going to be an essential step towards eliminating that microbial problem. So in other words, you can't really solve a microbe problem effectively without also removing the support elements that are water, biomass, and sediment. Okay, speaking of that, killing microbial contamination will slow down stored fuel breakdown. That should be pretty self-evident, right? Microbes will break the fuel down in a number of ways, so killing those microbes and getting rid of them is important to stopping that process or at least slowing it down. And then finally, using a fuel stabilizer to fight the chemical reactions that we talked about in the very beginning of this show. Using a fuel stabilizer is an essential step to stopping the oxidative and other chemical reactions that, if left unchecked, will result in stored fuel degradation. Now, it's always recommended that you treat your fuel with a chemical stabilizer package at least once a year. And you want to treat it as early in its storage life as possible. So if you get new fuel in your storage tank, you want to add stabilizer so that that chemical package is present at the very beginning when those reactions want to start up. If the stabilizer isn't in there at that time, there's not going to be anything in there to stop those reactions and they're going to proceed. So get the stabilizer in there early on if you can. So those are the aspects of long-term fuel storage that you need to know. There's a number of common environmental elements that fuel gets exposed to: heat, oxygen, water, microbial contamination, and they will degrade the fuel over time. And even if you could avoid every single one of these, you would still have reactive precursor molecules already in the fuel that would start to attack healthy fuel molecules virtually from day one. Fortunately, we've got those steps we just talked about: removing water, removing biofilms and sediment, killing the microbes, treating with stabilizer. These steps will protect your stored fuel and help it to last as long as possible. So that's it for this back to school episode. Thank you very much for joining me this time for the Fuel Pulse Show podcast. If you like what you heard, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. And if you want, leave us a review at your podcast platform of choice. And we'll see you next time for the next episode of the Fuel Pulse Show podcast.